Do modern Egyptians look like ancient Egyptians? Well, we have to just look at the visual evidence. These are Egyptian Copts, and I think it's pretty correct to say that their skin is pretty pale and their features generally Caucasoid. I want to test everybody watching. Anybody watching these videos, can you tell me if these two people to you look like they belong to the same race? If they do, I want you to comment one. If they don't, I want you to comment two. To me, they look like they couldn't possibly be of the same race. The one on the side, the Roman Julius Caesar, clearly is of Caucasoid appearance, and Ramses on this side is of Negroid appearance. So the question is, what features does Ramses have that black Africans don't, that make people so sure that he's not a black African? Because I could tell you, Julius Caesar, almost everything about him, I would be stretching it to the max to try and find a black African that looks like that. To show you how consistent this Egyptian look is, this is Amenhotep III on this side, and this is Ramses on this side, and they are many, many decades apart. But if you look at them, you could swear that it's the same person. Like it looks like the exact same person. The eyes of the Amenhotep are slightly closed compared to the Ramses one. But this is what I'm talking about when I say there is a consistency of form. The lips are not just big, they're giant. So, again, if we don't even agree that these features are typical of Negroid, then we're not even talking about the same thing. So when you ask, what does a modern Egyptian look like versus an ancient Egyptian? Well, there are some modern Egyptians who look like this. And I've seen many of them who look like this, and I agree. I know that a lot of people, I'm going to say something now. A lot of people, they're going to say, you're talking about movies, but I'm going to talk about movies because usually movies are the ones that generate this hate of like using black actors. If you use Egyptian actors and they look like this guy and they've got dark skin, whether or not they're 100% sub-Saharan African, I have no problem. The problem is when you use people who look like this, who clearly do not represent the race of the ancient Egyptians or anything about their features. This is a close-up of Amenhotep III, and I want you to look deep into his eyes and in your head try to make him not an African, especially when you look at those lips. Again, I've said this before, a telltale sign that you're looking at an African is, and it's not always this way, but one good way of telling is if the upper lip is bigger than the lower lip, especially by the standard that it is here. Worst of all is we don't even have to talk through this one. We could just tell that it's not the same. By the way, this is not CGI. This is a real statue. This seated scribe also shows African features in his face, especially if you zoom in. But there is a scribe that is less African in physical appearance, which I'm fully aware of and willing to accept as someone who wasn't the same as the features that has been displayed so far. But that would make him an exception. First dynasty, it's pretty obvious that he's black. Second dynasty, he mimics the other one. Third dynasty, okay, this guy's really, really black. Fourth dynasty, fifth dynasty, sixth dynasty and seventh dynasty. I mean, what do we need to prove this? It's funny that the ancient Egyptians went out of their way to portray themselves, saying no one will ever mistake our identity. Everyone will always get who we really look like, only to have their identity stolen by multiple people who deny their skin color. The redness and the brownness that is often portrayed is seen by some who wish to take away their image as metaphorical. They go out of their way to find statues that are not brown. And to me, this is a confession, because if the white ones are white, then you must admit that the brown ones are brown. But they will never admit this. Instead, they play games. They pretend they cannot see. But the second there's someone who says, you know what, statues aren't good enough for me, I think the Greeks might have been black, they'll be like, you Afrocentric crazy nutter. But for them, it's okay for to speculate that we are the founders of the Chinese Empire, we are the founders of the Indian Empire. By the way, you know that they're doing that right now. Like, Europeans are trying to lay claim to the civilizations. And I don't mean fringe. I mean, there are some people who are taking the Indo-European expansion and saying that it's responsible for the civilizations of China, India, and by extension, Japan. Which is why there's a hashtag that happened before called We Were Changs, which mocks this after they spent so much time trying to mock black people for quote unquote trying to steal Egyptian culture. I want to say thank you to Black Rampage for donating $4.99. Again, this is very helpful because, YouTube for the most part has not been profitable. I've spent a lot of time in videos showing the similarities between the culture of most Africans and the Egyptians, and that their cultures are so tied together that it's impossible to pull them apart. But, that's not going to work for some people. Also, I wanted to portray, that's why I showed you that the Central Africans had rubber. I wanted to portray that we don't even need Egypt to have great civilizations. We have gold civilizations going all over the east coast of Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and most importantly, West Africa. By the way, you're probably wondering, most importantly, yes, there's a reason why I almost jump over West Africa, because every 10 minutes, something new comes out about West Africa, because West Africa is one of the most complicated civilizations in the world. And their connection with the North Africans and the Moors makes it even more complicated. Quick question. Do some people not really realize that these people look like Middle Easterners? Or are they just playing another game? Do they not realize that the Sudanese Copts look like Middle Easterners? That the Sudanese population has been overwhelmed by Sudanese Arabs in recent years? That the North African areas have been overwhelmed by Arabs in recent years? And that the people who are native to those regions, regardless of skin color, know that there was a invasion coming from outside. And then, not to mention, several universities posted up during the Arabic Golden Age, which during this Golden Age, this crossroads, they like to call Egypt a crossroads, was used to cross and to stay, as a lot of scientists did in that area. But somehow the crossroads stops being a crossroads and starts being a trampoline, and everybody goes everywhere except for Egypt. No one likes to stay in Egypt anymore. Apparently, its allure has died down and foreigners don't like to go there. But I'm just rambling now because there's nothing more to say except, you know, my eyes work. But even before this golden age, there was the Library of Alexandria, which, as this article says, it attracted scholars from around the Mediterranean. Now, I want you to think like, did they just come there and then go home? How about all the Islamic Golden Age Islamic scholars who came and changed their names from Al Basri to Al Misri, which means Egyptian? How many of them do you need until you realize that Egypt, by the way, there's columns of Egyptians who moved into Egyptian women as well, who moved into the Middle East, and then Middle Eastern woman who moved into Egypt. Which, again, what do you want? How do you want to settle the fact that people from different areas, especially when they're living under similar empires, are going to move? And especially since they venerated them under the study of alchemy. If there was no mention of black people by any scholar at all, I would understand this sort of pushback against the black theory. But to have statues, people, and almost all history shove this direction and then to just shove back, it's disingenuous.